Over the weekend, we were describing how this could actually form right over here. And thank you so much for liking that video, because a lot of people were able to see it. And so a lot of people were aware that we were looking for something very similar to this over here, right in this area. And the reason we were looking for that was the 2 hour, right? And we're going to get into a lot of that as we do some technical analysis going forward for the SPY Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, Nvidia, AMD, and Meta, looking at AMC and GME and popping over to volatility to see what can form from this. Now, the first thing, just a little side note that we're going to show off this afternoon, is actually going to be something on tariffs. I think a lot of people are trying to understand these Trump tariffs, and I found something that describes it almost perfectly. Check it out, and then we'll get into the technicals.
We can't sell a Ford or GM in Europe. You go to Europe, you can't sell a Ford or GM. Why? There's 100% tariffs. How about in Japan? 100% tariffs. So do you think if we said we're going to tariff you the way you tariff us, do you think they're going to allow Mercedes and all these Japanese companies and Porsches and BMWs to all of a sudden have 100% tariffs in America? Of course not. They're going to come and negotiate, and their tariffs are going to come down. And finally, Ford and General Motors are going to be able to sell in these places.
How's that sound?
Of course they're going to come down. Of course. This is just negotiating.
It absolutely makes sense. If you do it strategically, if it's across the board, it creates a real problem. And the question is whether you believe the president is going to do it strategically or across the board. He keeps saying it across the board.
Well, when you're running for office, you make broad statements so people understand you. Right. Okay? Tariffs are an amazing tool by the president to use. They're an amazing tool. Right. He understands, don't tariff stuff we don't make. Right? If we don't make it, and you want to buy it, I don't want to put the price up there. It's pointless, but use tariffs to build in America. If we want to make it in America, tariff it, or if we're competing with it, tariff it. But you got to remember, we need to protect the American worker. Finally, someone's going to protect the American worker, and Donald Trump is here to protect the American worker.
Do you think we make a lot of money in tariffs, or if they're used as negotiating tactics? Look, tariffs will come down there. We're not going to have super high tariffs here either. There's not going to be a big pot of money at the end of the day.
I love that story. So which is it? Do we make a lot of money on tariffs, or we bring productivity here and we drive up our workers here? So it's a win-win scenario. I like both of them. I think what's going to happen is we'll make a bunch of money on the tariffs, but mostly everybody else is going to negotiate with us, and we will be more fair. In 1948, right, we came up with something called the Marshall Plan, right? The world, Germany and Japan were destroyed after World War II, and we wanted to export our economy to them. So we made a rule. They could tariff us, and we won't tariff them. So they can rebuild.
This is the best explanation I've heard of.
So they can rebuild their economy. We rebuilt their economy using something called the Marshall Plan. Yeah. Our economy is so awesome that we'll use it to help you rebuild. When should that have ended? What do you think, 1980? Right? 1985? I mean, why 40 years are Japan and Germany and all of Europe still tariffing the heck out of our auto industry, tariffing the heck out of our furniture industry?
There you go.
Do you realize all your furniture you're buying that's made foreign? It seems crazy. Why? It's because they tariff us and we don't tariff them. It's so obvious.
So I just think that that is a great explanation, and it happened on the financial media, so that's fantastic, and I think that explanation was fantastic. So if there's anyone that you know who is really worried about the tariffs, hey, let them see that video. Now, it's important to note with tariffs that when they do negotiate these agreements, it will take time, and most likely that will cause some turbulence at first, but at the end of the day, it could be a great thing for American companies and actually make cars cheaper. So interesting for that. Now, what we want to pay attention to going forward is, are we seeing big reversal signals right now? And if you're a part of the Patreon, we also did put out a video just describing how the weakness in momentum would form here. We're not going to go through all that because it was a 10-minute explanation on Patreon. You can go down and get that. And Patreon actually does give you the daily expected moves for tomorrow, which we need those first off when we talk about the SPY. So we can see that 598.51 to the upside is our daily expected move. These red lines here, and 588.83 to the downside. Daily expected moves priced in by the options market. So 68% chance to land here, 32% chance to see something crazy. And we already talked about this, but what we were really looking for confirmation, right? We saw some wonkiness throughout the day But the confirmation, the real one, was just, can we curl up on the 2-hour chart? We curled up on the 2-hour chart, and that positivity is coming in a little bit more. Now, how did we have hints that this was most likely going to go in the upward direction? Well, we were paying attention to the fact that we formed a double bottom. We went back into our buy zone to grab some buyers for a second and created this cross up right here really close to the center line for the MACD, and that's a big deal, right? We were talking in the past about higher lows. This divergence down here going into a higher low, fantastic curl up because it is right by positive territory. You notice some wonkiness comes in, but that never crossed back down. So that's just saying, hey, this is most likely going to curl up the 2-hour. That ended up happening, and now the most likely thing is to continue it. But something we need to be aware of is the fact that this was a great move, and we got far away from that 5-day moving average. That is the staggered line that is here on this chart, and we just noticed that maybe we want to reconnect with that. So the 30-minute could curl down into in positive territory still, and pretty good level here too. If we're going to curl down, we can still head up, right? This is still turned up. We're just talking about if we need to react. That 30-minute could curl down, go retest that 5 or test a daily expected move, and then see if that can turn back up. We'll pay attention to any divergences that are outside of a weekly expected move next week, or especially this monthly expected move. Because if this 30-minute gets by the center line and curls back up, that most likely will not curl down the 2-hour, but something to be aware of is if we get excited and we do something like this, well, then you're going outside of a weekly expected or a monthly expected move, and you still have some time left in this month. So we will look out and notify you if that's happening, and we update you every single night throughout the week. The Qs, we were looking for a very similar thing to right over here. This is what we talked about all weekend. We talked about this well in advance, and then we waited patiently while it formed throughout the week. And guess what? Another higher low, just like the last time in a buy zone. So that's why we were paying attention to it. The 30-minute did curl up really close to positive territory, so that's fantastic. The Qs gave you a little fake out because they actually did close at the low of this bar and give you that blip on the MACD, but right away the next bar says, hey, positivity's there and we're going positive. That's great. So the 2-hour, something I do want to pull up here and get you guys those daily expected moves, right? So we have the daily expected moves of 513.16. Remember, that's in the same area it was today. We didn't get to it. But we still saw some rip around moves in the morning there. That was very cool. Then the bottom side expected move 493.18. There's a couple of problems here because the Qs, we do have this pink line. This pink line is the annual expected move. Okay, so we are experiencing something crazy for the year, and we need to pay attention if we make daily signals or something like that. We start to curl down on weeklies. We will pay attention to that. But the main thing is we made this a strong base. The 2-hour is not even positive yet. Can we curl up into positive territory, or are we going to see the SPY make that high and the Qs fall a little bit short? That's something we will pay attention to. But as you see it right now, you just see that 2 hours curling up in positive territory, starting to get a little bit better as we take back the 5. We can always see on the 30-minute how we could react down, maybe even touch that zone again to actually go higher here. So that's what I'll be paying attention to mainly for the Qs. Will the 30-minute curl down early on in the day and be able to curl back up for that next push higher? Or is it just going to keep dropping? And that would curl down the 2-hour. Right now, it's looking pretty positive, and we could test this high, go make a new one. If Apple experiences some weakness tomorrow, you do have potential for double top here. You do have potential. You're now seeing this. I'm not saying it has to curl down. I mean, most likely if the market's going to remain positive, we're not going to see anything wonky into expiration. Well, then this 2-hour most likely won't cross. It does have weakness here, so you have to pay attention if that does cross to downside, because the daily can curl down into negative territory from a signal like that. But in the shorter term here, we can really see those divergences. And Apple is saying it's weak right now. It's saying, hey, look at these divergences. That led to a drop. We base out right at our 225.84. It's a great level to pay attention to. We've paid attention to it for a long time. And now we're noticing this next point. So is this some kind of consolidation to break through that? Or are we going to curl down early on and not be able to curl back up? If you're not able to curl back up and you go negative, very likely to take out 225.84, and then you have to see what happens around this zone for Apple. There's not too much going on besides just like, hey, pay attention, because there is some weakness. There are some weakness signals for Apple right now. Tesla, we're really just consolidating and looking for a break. We know that weekly move is right above us. We have daily expected moves for tomorrow. If you have expiration for tomorrow, daily expected moves are great, and you can join the Patreon for just pretty much a cup of coffee a month. It's great. It's down there in the description. You can get those moves and know how high up the market, the options market, is pricing in Tesla to go for tomorrow's close, and that's a great, powerful thing to have. So as of right now, we are curled down on this 30-minute, and this is the main thing I want to talk about. We're curled down on this 30-minute. If we would break through this consolidation, then you would say, hey, it is likely to end up maybe filling that gap. If we could turn this thing back around, though, we could end up seeing an upward move. We do have to be a little bit cautious with that upward move because we might be making a 2-hour divergence. But for now, we're just looking if Tesla is going to break through this consolidation at some point. We see wicks, we see wicks, we see wicks, a lot of little fake outs happening, but mainly just moving sideways, consolidating, getting tight, and then big move is most likely coming in the very near future. Amazon is one that I actually kind of like if it could take back this 5, because you'll notice we had kind of a steep divergence here and it failed. And then we came down and we made another point of divergence. It's still holding pretty good across the way here. We noticed we were not able to break that tapering cleanly. So I do still like this. The fact that it curled up at the end of the day, it's just on a negative bar. So I'd like to see some follow through. I'd like to see us take back that 5-day moving average because this 2 hours is a little beat up, right? The 2 hours is a little beat up. This is one that showed us major weakness. If you want a reminder of that major weakness, you have 2-hour divergence here. You see the price action going up, MACD facing straight down, and the RSI giving you that signal at the same time. So this can curl down a daily chart. We are seeing some reversal signals. If that does curl up and curl up this 2 hour, it would say a positive move is there, but you're starting to get a little deeper into negative territory at this moment. So if you want to go test this high, it's got to be a strong move. So it does make sense that we're kind of creating this stronger base at this moment. If we're going to be able to test that high, go make a new one, which I don't believe that is guaranteed, at least highly probable. With this curl up, it can happen, but can I say it's highly probable? Most likely not. Now, the reason that I'm saying that is just because the daily has crossed with that 2-hour divergence. We notice the daily has crossed. We can always see little bounces and things like that. But if this daily momentum is saying something, it's saying, hey, this needs to pull back a little bit further. We did talk about the level of 200. We went down to that. But then we talked about the level of 195, and we talked about that because it matched this high a little bit. And we actually went down to there. So if we're going to save ourselves, this daily MACD will need to curl up into positive territory. Right now, it looks like we could see that move up. Maybe we have more work to be done, and then a 2-hour divergence would be the overall better situation to see some kind of reversal signal, some kind of reason for this daily to turn up. But just a note, like Amazon does not have big reversal signals on the daily. None of these charts really do have big reversal signals on the daily. I think the one was NVIDIA. We're going to get into that next. But for the most part, you see if this just wanted to keep going down for a little bit of time, maybe fill this gap all the way down here and then curl up into positive territory, you would just have a simple swing trade here. So that's something I would just look out for. Look for the simplest opportunities out there. And this was bad, right? This was the bad look from NVIDIA before earnings. We see some major move up, some major moves down. So we really got to see if this thing can turn back up or if we're going to get some kind of more corrective move, maybe to go down to 135 at this point. And we can kind of see this level here might be important to 132.06, because if you react down to that level, you could start to create that series where you actually start to make lower highs. And that's a big deal because the daily has crossed over. You do have opportunities to turn down bigger time frames than the daily, and that's a big problem. But we can see in the 2-hour at this moment, we're still positive in positive territory. You can obviously see that we're reaching up to this area. And I was saying overall yesterday, just real brief, I was trying to say throughout it, hey, like, I just hope this isn't a liquidity grab to flush this thing. The way you're going to know if this thing is turning down is really if the 2-hour can cross here, then you know, hey, it's highly probable to go test this low and go make a new one because you're really close to that center line down there. The 30-minute at this moment too, I just want to point out the 30-minute because it's showing weakness here for NVIDIA. This is weakness in momentum. It's very close to the center line at this point. So the 2-hour does have a good likelihood to cross down if this 30-minute can confirm that down. You see how the price action's heading up like this. We see how the MACD is just facing down, the RSI just facing down. So I would be very cautious with NVIDIA if I do see this 30-minute roll down tomorrow, unless it's able to quickly buy itself back up. But right now it's just saying the momentum to the upside here is weak. We got to get rid of these signals. We got to really just see the 30-minute go higher to get rid of those signals. AMD's looked pretty bad for a long time, right? AMD's looked pretty bad for a long time. So we have to pay attention to the fact that this actually the daily is close to crossing, right? The times where you want to pay attention if you can catch something is when that daily starts to look like, hey, it kind of looks like it wants to cross. Then you go, oh, okay, let me look at a 2 hour, see if I have divergence. I do have it on the MACD, it's just not on the RSI at the same time. So if that 2 hour does roll down, which we did talk about, if that rolls down, we can chop this low, take out some stops, and then look if there's some kind of reversal there, right? And if that doesn't set up, then this thing's just bad, right? If this 2 hour curls down, it means bad. If it can create a little divergence point, that's when you say, okay, this can look a little bit better. Now we do see this blip here on the MACD on the 2 hour, so it makes me want to look at the 30-minute and say, oh, well, this is where you can really read into it and where a really good trade actually could set up for something like AMD. And that's if this happens. That's if you actually turn down on this 30-minute MACD. Now, as of right now, you're trying to carve that out as a higher low. You need to retake the 5, and then you can start that series of, higher highs, higher lows. But at this moment, we got to be aware if that 30-minute does cross down. This is where having a daily expected move for AMD by joining Patreon can really help, because if that curls down and then you see that curl back up, you might make that 2 hour divergence and a 30-minute divergence at the same time, which means the momentum to the downside is getting pretty damn weak here, and that daily most likely is about to experience a bounce. So that is something I would pay attention to for AMD. Just wait and be patient with this one. Am I going to trade AMD? I've been saying this for a while. I haven't traded AMD for a long time because the signals do not play out the best all the time. They set up, but they set up too many times for me to really benefit enough from these signals. Meta actually getting a spike down today, and we curl down on that 30-minute, and notice this, we're really close to the center line, but it was able to curl back up. So it saved itself, it took back the 5. That's a good thing. The 2 hour is still curled up in positive territory. You're pretty much testing the area where you would say is the first real form of resistance. You see these lows, 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 even across the way, low, and then pretty much you would say held there, able to springboard higher. So what I would really pay attention to is the fact that the 2 hours still turned up, right? So we can always make that move higher, but if that 2 hour turned down, it would look a little bit worse. And I think going into the 30-minute again and just showing, hey, if that 30-minute does cross down, you want to pay attention, because if this comes back down into this area, it seems like buyers are down in this area, right? So they don't want it to drop below there. If we can curl down without crossing the 2 hour and curl back up on the 30-minute, there might be an opportunity going into next week for Meta. AMC, some big things to talk about here for AMC. And one of those big things is the fact that the daily is just refusing to cross here, and that's very, very interesting to me. So I almost got out of this play just because of the signals at GME that we're about to go over, right? I almost got out of one of my position plays on the option side. Obviously, I'm still just going to hold the stock. I don't really care. If this thing goes lower, I'll just buy a little bit more. But we can just see here that that daily refusing to cross for AMC, which is very interesting. Because this 2 hour, it was able to go negative, but then it curled up, and we've kind of done this consolidation ever since. So something I was watching throughout my day was the 30-minute. I was really seeing if this thing wanted to cross, and you just see it's just refusing to cross. If that does cross, it's saying, hey, I could see a 30-minute pullback at this moment. Maybe it's a little bit worse if that can cross this center line, go negative. So that's what I'd be paying attention to for AMC, just the fact that it's holding up. In the 2 hour, the 30-minute, and the daily are all still positive. If that starts to change, that's when you have to change your thinking. Right now, it's saying I'm consolidating at higher levels. If I can break through a price point of 450, we know that max pain is usually at 450, and maybe you're able to see something crazy. This is where it's good to subscribe, because we do give you the key level every single week for AMC and GME, the level that you need to break through, and we give you daily expected moves on Patreon, but the level you need to break through this week to really see something crazy is 496. And that would be a little bit more unlikely on Friday. On Friday, they like to fight the stock. That's just something to note. But the main thing to pay attention to is GameStop. Okay, GameStop, first of all, notice this. No divergence in the near price action. That's great. So if you curl up, then this thing still has a shot. There's just a big problem with the sell-off that's happening, which is the 2 hour was able to cross. And if you really look at this thing, you're going, ooh, That's some pretty steep divergence at this point. Now, one thing I wanted to point out about this 2-hour divergence is in the past. And so 2-hour divergences, they're known to curl down the daily, so we'll just mention that real quick. The daily can go through a pullback. This is a very positive move. A pullback, maybe even all the way down, right? They really flush it to make people sell out of it, get down to 23.50, and then you see this thing start to base back out. And I'm more leaning towards January for this, but if it's going to happen right now, weirdly enough, this signal makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way back to when this big moment happened so you guys can see it. And I'm going to show you guys this little pocket right in here. And doesn't it look kind of similar to what we're going through right now? And if you notice, at this point, you did have a relatively significant divergence. And you actually did confirm that to the downside on the end of a Friday on a positive bar. So Fridays are probably pretty important because then the gap up happened on a Monday. Most of the time, these big gap ups are going to happen on a Monday. They do not want the stock to close at really high prices on Friday. So if we see this start to roll over daily charts and curl down, that's not going to be good. But I just wanted to show you this block right here because it looks very, very similar. You have this consolidation into a new high, and then you go over to the near price action. You go, okay, what do we have at this moment? Well, we have this consolidation into a new high, and they both are creating those divergences. So it looks similar. It tells me, hey, don't give up on the stock just yet. Maybe wait and see if that daily is able to cross, and then daily momentum is a little bit stronger. So you might have just bought yourself some time. This could be a little different because that moment happened on a Friday, but you'll notice that this same block right here is pretty damn similar to this block over here, and the next week, that thing popped off. So we'll see what happens with GameStop. If you want to see something crazy this week, you got to get through 3104. We're going to update that level, so make sure you're subscribed to get that on Sunday. Volatility was able to curl up on the MACD, and that's kind of a big deal. It's just on an indecision bar. So we need to see a positive bar here. You're noticing that's a negative 1.69%. It's still above the 9, which is great, but you'd really like to see a curl up with a positive bar. So we're going to dig into these shorter time frames just for a moment here, showing you guys the 2-hour chart, because does that daily have the opportunity to reject here? And the answer is yes. We saw the 30-minute divergence for this to fall. We saw another one that was more multiple point divergence that fell, and then we're just getting these reactions down to the 5. So if this is going to take off, you're going to see this 2-hour whip back around. You're just noticing the divergences all across this RSI, hinting that this 2-hour or even a 4-hour would have more work to do. So since we're seeing that, and if we're going to see volatility come in early on, you might see a 30-minute able to cross up and take out this high, maybe get rejected at 20. But if we're going to see that 2-hour continue to head down with those little divergences saying the 4-hour can pull back or even drop to lower levels. So what were we just talking about in the SPY? Well, if it makes a 2-hour divergence outside of the monthly expected move, that is when we want to be paying attention. But something else we want to pay attention to are 2 scenarios here for volatility. One, if this is going to be some mega squeeze that turns back down this VIX, turns up the SPY, and then we see some kind of big squeeze upward, then we might want to pay attention to a 4-hour creating some kind of divergence on the MACD down here. That would be a great hint, and it would happen at the same time as the SPY gets outside of a monthly expected move. The next one is the same scenario. The SPY goes and makes that divergence, but volatility is actually able to hold up around this 1504 or the gap fill. What that does is that says some big weakness can come into the market. And the reason for that is because if you draw up the 2 scenarios here, and the cross up is here and the cross up is here, which one is closer to going to 20? Which one is closer to seeing the level of 20 taken out and seeing major volatility come in? Well, you would say the higher low scenario. So that's what we're paying attention to for volatility. As of right now, it really looks like we want to see that new high for the SPY. We'll see if we have some more work to be done. We'll see if we just roll over because things can change very quickly. It's the damn stock market, right? So we'll pay attention to these for you, and we'll pay attention to if these signals are happening at the same time and make sure that if this signal pops up, we will be posting it to Patreon. I guess the main takeaway for this video is, are we going to get a brief pullback early on in the morning on the 30-minute and not be able to curl down this 2-hour? If we curl down this 2-hour, then this could be a liquidity grab to send stocks lower. We'll pay attention to any kind of divergence still in our zone for the 2-hour, but for now, it's pointing up in positive territory, and the swing trade would say, hey, we're most likely to go maybe towards that monthly expected move sometime tomorrow, sometime next week. So that's what we're paying attention to. It's just right after we do that, we have to be aware if there's any kind of weakness showing, because we would be making a 2-hour divergence outside of there, and volatility might show us a reversal signal at the same time. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. The course is still 90% off for the next only 10 days. You have 10 days to get it. So if you're watching this far, you're dedicating yourself to learning. That is awesome. I respect you for it. If you need a little bit more insight in how to understand this style, how to understand your indicators, how to really dig deeper into all of these things, learn about weekly ranges, that course is down there in the description for you. You can get both courses right now for $150. We're most likely never going back to that price, so get it while it lasts. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. I really appreciate this community, and I look forward to streaming with you guys tomorrow morning. Peace out.